It's a busy morning at High Ash Farm in the farmyard with Chris Skinner in the farm truck, which is doubling as a bird hide this morning. It's a cold January morning. The farmyard pond is frozen over, but we're just enjoying ourselves, aren't we, Chris, watching those holes on the side of that farm building?
Yes, this is a relatively new building at High Ash Farm, and when I'd completed it, there's an old pantile red brick building behind us, and I made all the ridge tiles into Sparrow boxes, and they all got full. And with this new building, as with many modern agricultural buildings, they're meant to be bird proof, so I built separate Sparrow boxes inside, and sparrows seem to be taking up a lot of sort of the media news at the moment and becoming a red list species. And these particular ones here at High Ash Farm are house sparrows, Passer domesticus, the domestic bird in other words. And there's people walking about everywhere, people chatting around us just over there. The liveries are all doing their horses and cleaning ice out of the water tanks this morning. And the sparrows here, there's 42 nest boxes in a row, and I never thought they'd be all occupied, and there's no space left whatsoever. They're all occupied, and you can see some of the sparrows sitting on their little perches outside the holes here, females and males. And if you look in the very first hole, Matthew, there's a male house sparrow.
He's peeking out.
And we're only, 15, 20 feet away.
I think I can see birds in those first three, you know.
Yes, they're all occupied. And there's a lady out there, she's sort of not sunning herself this morning because we've got a fair sheet of cloud over the top of us. But just as we arrived, I think they were all outside having a chat, and what I'll do, I'll record some of the sounds in a little while. But all over the farmyard, if I put the boxes out on the farm, for house sparrows, absolutely none would be occupied. There seems to be a sort of what we call a commensal relationship between sparrows and humans. But I think the balance is very much in favour of the sparrows, because I don't know what benefits they confer to us, other than the fact I just love having them here.
Well, they're very chattery, aren't they? And they're very garrulous with their neighbours as well. They all stand out on their little perches there. Yes. You've got 40 odd in a row there, and really, I mean, it seems like they're sort of neighbours talking to each other over the garden fence.
Yes, you used an interesting word there, and I'd say they're gregarious. They actually love being together, and if the numbers get down to one or two house sparrows, they kind of give up the ghost and don't breed. So they need to be. They're members of the African weaver bird family. I suppose some of the most untidy nest builders in the world, and house sparrows use holes. They have a cousin, a kind of country cousin called the tree sparrow, Passer montana, and they're quite scarce now. They're slightly different, slightly smaller than a house sparrow, and a lovely chestnut crown on top of the head, and a little cheek patch as well, which helps you identify them. And I just love having them here. And you can see just near the car park over there, there's a row of 3 oak trees there, and each of the oak tree has between 20 and sort of 10 nest boxes on each of them, and believe it or not, they're all occupied as well. So I think if my father came back into existence, he's passed away a few years ago, he'd be saying you're probably getting near the limit before they start to become a pest, and they certainly were a pest in the post-war years and before that. And I just love having them here, Matthew, and it's filling up the post bag this week.
Well, lots of people agree with you and really want to encourage sparrows to their properties. John and Veronica, hello to the Prices from Somerset, and they've sent a photograph of the sparrow boxes that they've constructed out of plywood with varnish as well and a hinged roof. It's a real des res. And the photograph is to your design that you sent to them quite recently, I think. So what do you think of these efforts?
I'm absolutely thrilled. I'm just going to have a look because they've sent 1 or 2 pictures through. And this is...
Oh, and these are the holes.
This is absolutely perfect. This is the one we're looking at, which is just above the ladies over there who are chattering away. You can guess it, about horses, not about sparrows. And it's a cracking nest box. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes in that. And the only problem that has been made, I recommended quite thick ply, and I think it's 18mm ply has been used, with a backboard as well. And of course it weighs about what 2 or 3 people can lift up. But
Oh yes, 18 mil is quite thick, isn't it?
it is quite thick, but that helps with the insulation. And it's a real, as you said, a des res, and hopefully it's ideal for sparrows. Now, to seed it, when you have erected it, try and get it at least 3 metres off the ground, so it's away from the local furry pests.
That's about 10 foot, isn't it?
Yes, that's the ideal height. Then if you've got any really soft hay, just stick it into the holes above their little perches there, the nest holes, and that should help seed it, because it attracts sparrows. They love sort of scruffy hay hanging out of holes and things, and that, fingers crossed, should seed it for you.
And here's a note from Susan Young. Hello, Susan, from Helpston in Cambridgeshire. Dear Chris, I feed the sparrows and do all I can to encourage them. I'm currently spending more than £16 for 20 kilos of seed. It's mainly wheat and some maize flakes and a few sunflower seeds. I can get wheat for £8 a kilogram. Would that be okay for the sparrows, please? So getting wheat instead of a mix?
Yes, I would certainly recommend a mix. They're quite choosy feeders, our sparrows, and quite messy feeders as well. So there is now some new varieties of seed mixers coming out by all the main bird seed manufacturers, and there's a new variety coming out called Wheat Free. And it contains some sunflowers, just a few peanuts, but a whole variety of mixed small seeds. I tell you what we're going to do. We've just looked at their nesting sites. I'm just going to start the truck. There the sparrows, all with their heads sticking out of the holes. But I've done something else at the farm here. Let's just move forwards a little bit. And this is a sparrow hide round this side of the buildings. It looks a strange residence.
This ivy-clad
It's
hut.
completely covered in ivy. Some jackdaws.
I can hear some sparrows.
Yes.
Garrulous.
That lovely
Gregarious.
little chatter. Yes, gregarious. That's the right word for them. And all the way down the hedge here, it's absolutely packed. And that's my sparrow hedge. It's cut every year, and so it's lovely and tight. And that, if a sparrowhawk comes past, the sparrows just drop down in the hedge. And you can see there's a village near Brook called Seething, but this is seething with sparrows. Let's just hop out and I will show you the feeders and how messy sparrows are.
Right. Out into the fresh air. It's very fresh this morning. And the sparrows hopping around inside the hedge.
Yes, there we are. Oh, some flew out just in front of us.
Well, this is where you feed the sparrows.
Yes, I'll just open the gate. There we are. And in we go. And you can see my mix here. There's 2 large feeders. Each feeder is a metre tall. And each
Look like
one,
howitzer shells they do, don't they?
each one holds 10 kilos of seed, and you can see this. I clean the tray out every Saturday morning.
Is that Niger seed in
And
there?
this is millet.
Oh, sunflower seed.
Sunflower seed there, the large black seeds. You can see they've pulled out quite a bit of wheat. There's some whole maize there, which that's far too big for the sparrows to eat. But there's also crushed maize in here.
Which is corn, isn't it?
Yes, corn. That's what you'd call corn in America. That's so your cornflakes isn't corn from England. It's maize all crushed up. They're little maize sort of pellets there. But a lot of small seeds. So if I just scrape across the top of the seed like that, and then blow, there. Now you can see the millet and hemp seed mixed in amongst it. So, and that's what they like, because they can pick that up, swallow it, and digest it. Remember, birds don't have teeth, so they go out on the hedgerows here and actually pick up the grit off the ground close by, and that grinds up the seeds for them. But it's such a lovely sight if you stand up high and look across the top of the hedge, which goes away from us.
Oh yes, there they are, with their little brown heads.
Yes, so absolutely wonderful.
One or two tits in there as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But you've got this shelter here, really. It keeps the food lovely and dry.
That's right, I've done it. It's completely open fronted and there's some mesh on the door, not to keep birds out, you understand? But each side of us is a horse paddock, and horses have very long necks, almost giraffe length. And in the past, a horse has reached into the front of the hide and scoffed some of the feed. So
They like their cornflakes in the morning.
absolutely. So I put a little mesh over the front of the hide. So that's what sparrows like. So they can come in, it's sort of help yourself as and when you want. And they generally have 2 big feeds a day. One about 9:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and one about 2 in the afternoon.
I think they're impatient for us to leave, actually.
I can hear them.
we're in the way.
That's either swearing or just approving of what we're doing. Oh, just look at them down there, over the top of the hedge.
Dozens of them.
Look at that. It's an amazing sight.
It's a lovely broad
Look at
hedge.
that. Absolutely. Just flying off down there, crazily flying about, which is what they do at this time of the year. They've gone on to the other hedge, onto the next paddock. There you are. That's a real treat. And sort of sparrow kneecaps, my father said I'd have, unless I ate my greens at lunchtime. There's more coming in,
Yes.
right over the top of us.
Only a few feet away here.
Yeah.
Just down in the lower part of the hedge. Look at them all standing there waiting for us to go.
Look at that.
You're going to have to wait for one more email because Carl, hello Carl Eglinton in Lowestoft, we had sparrows nesting in each corner of the back of our house last year and the neighbour's house, nesting just under roof tiles. They were doing really well till magpies kept helping themselves to the young. Another neighbour said to put fat balls out so the magpies would use them instead. Would this help? What do you think, says Carl?
Ooh, interesting question. Diversionary feeding can work. In other words, you're feeding a bird to keep it away from eating something else by making it very easy. Magpies will eat fat balls, but they'll pick the whole fat ball off and then secrete it somewhere and then come back for another one. So the best way is to provide like our previous questioners have, with a nest box, and that's magpie proof, so the little hole size is just right. The magpies can't perch outside the box because there's not enough room for them, and that means there's safe haven for the sparrows to bring up their young, and they can bring 2, occasionally 3 broods off in a year. So if you have got them breeding close to you in your area, then look after them. Red list species just means they're declined by 50% or more in the last few years, and that's a colossal number when you think of the sparrow population in the United Kingdom in the 1970s, when recording numbers first started. Then vast numbers have gone missing, and we don't want those to drop anymore. But you're being serenaded by a flock of high-ash sparrows.
It's a grey old day, but much drier than of late. And Chris, here on High Ash Farm, as in so many other places, the land needs a bit of respite from the rain, doesn't it?
Yes, it's just been continuous, but nevertheless, it was sorely needed. I know a lot of people will be scratching their heads with that comment, but it's been so dry over 2 previous years. Our average rainfall has been much lower over each 12-month period, and so it's helped to recharge the aquifer. And there's an old clay pond. We're actually on top of a hill here, Matthew. We're standing on clay, and the pond is about as full as I've ever seen it in years and years and years. So the water table is replenished, which is exactly what we want.
Is that in that fringe of woodland?
Yes, it's a little bit further down. We'll be driving past it in a minute because we're en route. Because it's a cold morning, I've decided to be very kind to you and pop you in one of the bird hides because I know you're a bit of a lightweight. But on our way, I just thought we'd walk out into the overwinter wild bird seed mix here. There's wheat, barley, triticale, all sorts of small seeds.
Teasels.
Teasels, that's the teasel walk that's still there, and the teasels are... Now, in front of us, Matthew, you're not going to believe this, Just a few hundred yards away, over 1,000 pigeons.
Well, I can see about half a dozen,
Yes.
maybe 10.
And a few jackdaws. Let's just walk out and see what we can see. Because
How many do you say there are?
there's over 1,000 feeding here, and they're just down in the crop. They can't see us, but Skinner knows that they're here.
This is a big field.
It is a big field. It's 30 acres, and you can see.
Oh, up they go.
Up they go. Look at that. You can actually see and hear the wings, and they're nearly straight down again. And you can see they're not really worried about us, and they're circling round and coming down, and it's like that all over this field. And lots of farmers, when I started doing this overwinter wild bird seed mix, about nearly 20 years ago now, leaving fields unharvested, they got very, very cross with me, saying, oh, attracting pigeons and feeding vermin on your farm, you know, you're a deserter, Skinner. And actually, after a year or two, it went very quiet because the pigeons all came here, and that meant they weren't feeding on my neighbour's rape fields. And suddenly they went very quiet.
You went 0 to hero.
Yes, it's such a strange thing. Now, we're just coming into an interesting time of year, Matthew. It's called the Hungry Gap. And most of the seeds out on fields have all been eaten and consumed, and that means there's no fresh seeds until everything starts flowering again in the spring and producing seed for 2024, and that's not going to happen for some time. So providing crops like this helps to feed the birds over the winter. And don't just think there's pigeons here, there's flocks of linnets, goldfinches, all sorts of different species of birds out there, and probably a lot of small mammals as well, hares and deer out here.
What is there still to eat then in this mix?
It's absolutely full of seeds.
So there's still ears, aren't there, here? Ears of corn.
They're my ears, actually, you're looking at. Yes. So look here. This is a pod plant. This is called fodder radish. Very white, crunchy pods. We'll crunch one open for you. And when you look inside, little, tiny, pink seeds. There they are, and rather like mustard, they're very, very hot to eat. There you are. Do you want to try one and just crunch it up with your teeth?
I don't want to take the meal out of some bird's mouth, but I will.
Go on, try that, and I'll try the other one. And you should see after a second or two, it's very peppery.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Got that?
Yeah.
Yep. So that's called fodder radish, and the beauty of it is the seeds are contained in a paper-like pod, which is about 3-4 centimetres long. Here they are. Very crunchy and waterproof. And the birds actually perch on those because it's quite a rigid plant and get the seed out.
Oh, there's lots of it still here, isn't there?
Oh, there's masses of it. Then we've got the cereal component, and this was a mistake that's turned out to be absolutely brilliant. I accidentally, with the mix of spring barley, spring wheat, and what I thought was spring triticale, I actually planted some winter triticale, which is a cross between wheat and rye. And just look down here, and that's what the pigeons are feeding on. There's a complete ear of cereals. Almost looks as though you could, even after all that rain, it's not sprouted. And that's each one of those little grains down the side. And there must be 20 there, 2 rows of 10. And I can actually get one of the seeds out like that. There you are. That's a triticale seed, and perfect nutrition for our birds. So all the pigeons have disappeared down into the crop again.
But if we walk forward another 10 yards, they'd be up again.
Well, you'd see hares in here, and there's lots of small mammals as well.
And there was some sand dug up just here
yes,
behind us,
because that's right. We're just on the crest of the hill between the sand and the clay. We're actually standing on clay here at the moment, and 10 yards away there's sand, and that's typical of High Ash Farm and how the glaciers left all the soil types. Over on the other side of the valley, you can see outcrops of sand. It's really unusual, and between us and the hill on the other side of the valley, a big gouge out, and that's where water ran underneath the ice sheets down to the local river valley and then through out into the North Sea. But just look at that. Now, I said I'm going to be kind to you. We're going to hop back in the truck, drive past that little pond that's brimming full, and I'm going to pop you in a hide, and we're going to see some different birds to those house sparrows. We're going to visit one of the woodland hides here at High Ash Farm. So back in the truck, I've got to keep you warm.
I'm still getting some flavour from the fodder radish.
Yeah, it is quite pungent, yeah.
They always said, come to Chris for a hearty breakfast.
One fodder radish seed.
That'll keep me going for the rest of the day.
Off we go.
So, Chris, is the bird hide centrally heated?
I'm afraid not, only when we're sitting in it. And you need a good breakfast, Matthew, and that's called central heating. Anyway, look at this. It's some evergreen component. This is Fox's Grove. We've been in this woodland several times before, but there's one or two secrets in here hidden away, and one of them is a bird hide. And I mean, we're quite close to it, but you can't see it.
So well hidden.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, there's a deer over there, Chris.
Oh, look at that.
Two of them.
Just, 20 yards from us. A male muntjac behind with the little antlers. Really dark brown fur at this time of the year. One of the introduced species. Look at that. Well spotted. And a rabbit running across.
I saw the tail.
Just the scut going away.
The muntjac aren't bothered with us at all. They're
No,
walking away.
This is what happens at this time of the year. The animals and the birds start to get hungry, and they lose some of that initial fear that they have of humanity. But they're very wise to move away. Many are shot around the countryside at this time of the year. They're regarded as a pest species now. The introduced species, of course, I think the Duke of Bedford introduced them to Woburn.
Poor old Duke of Bedford, he always gets your ire, doesn't he?
He does, yes. But it's all part of the tapestry of the countryside. Just, here we are.
They're clearly woodland birds, because you can hear them.
Yes. Right, here's the hide. Secreted away, so we'll just go in as quietly as we can now till we get inside.
And in we come.
Yeah.
Carpeted interior for the soundproofing, I think, rather than for my comfort.
Yes.
And we'll sit on the bench, and in front of us some windows.
Yes.
And already birds.
Yes, yeah, we've come in. It's typical of the cold weather, Matthew. So we've just got to sort of sit. I was going to say we're going to have to sit and wait for the first birds to.
Three glorious blue tits.
Yes, one of the smaller members of the tit family. And a great tit as well. Well, this it's not a film through that glass, so we're actually watching real wildlife just 3 feet away from us.
Shows how hungry they are that they've not minded us going through this territory.
Yes.
Within seconds, they're on the feed.
They're on the feeders, and so they will have had an early feed. We're now mid-morning, and many birds will have fed already, and this is coming back for a second feed. So what I've done here is magnetise this area of woodland for birds by providing feed all the year round. The hide is about 8 feet wide and 6 feet wide, and just outside the windows, which are one-way glass, and there is a camera hole in the centre of one of the holes, and you can see it's much brighter looking through that hole. So some of the light is excluded for us looking out, but 90% of the light on the outside looking in. So we're, as far as outside's concerned, we're sitting in pitch black for those birds, so they can't see us, although you're sitting there with some questions for us to answer again in a little while and flashing those around. And you're not meant to be a bird scarer, Matthew.
Well, I'm always amazed with how in the pristine condition these birds are in, but then, as you always explain, the birds have to be in pristine conditions, else in these wintry
Yes,
weather
yep,
times, that else
yep.
they would just die, wouldn't
When you shut your house doors in the evening and turn the heating up and curl up in a warm bed, these birds are out in this without doubt, and that's why evergreen component and plants like ivy are so important at this time of the year, particularly in deciduous woodlands, which this one mainly is. There's holly. In the distance there I can see a nice large holly tree. There's also bramble forming an understory, and some box here planted by shooters years ago in these old shooting rides. And box is quite surprising because it's a British native, which many people don't realise. One of the sempivaran species, Buxus sempivaran, and there's lots of it here at High Ash Farm. So there is overnight cover for them, and any old trees as well, I leave those standing full of woodpecker holes, so they're kind of natural nest sites for some of the birds in the future. So we do have to sit here a short while because undoubtedly we will have sort of put some of the shyer birds off, and they will have flown away. And it's good that the blue tits, great tits are already back here feeding, and we'll be looking for some of the woodland specialists if we sit here a short while.
Who else could be around?
Oh, anybody. Yes, we've already seen those deer, and they're the two muntjac deer that we saw are certainly woodland species, but specialist woodland birds, things like great spotted woodpecker, lesser spot woodpecker and green woodpecker. We'd unlikely to see green woodpecker on the feeders, but the other two species are quite frequent visitors. And one of my favourites is the nuthatch. And then watching the woodland floor, because we're sitting quite high up in the hide, we've got a good panoramic view of quite an area of woodland, and you can be suddenly eyes caught by a bird that just looks like the leaf litter, and that would be a woodcock as well, which spend the daytime out in the woodlands here. So there we are. We're just going to sit and be quiet for a short while, and then let the woodland settle back to what it was before two large humans walked into their territory. But those tits don't mind at all. The great tit coming in there is lovely, that lovely yellow lemon breast. Passer. One of the passer species. I'm just looking. Oh, that's a male great tit. You can tell the male great tits, they've got a very wide black stripe down the centre of the breast and those white cheeks, and the female has almost a little pencil line down her chest, so you can actually tell the sexes apart. Blue tits, which has lots feeding in front of us now, they're nearly impossible to identify the male and female. So we've got a mixture of fat balls on the left, then peanut feeder, then a grain feeder, and that's no ordinary feeder again. It's a Skinner special. It's 1 metre tall and 150 millimetres diameter. It holds 10 kilos, and the one on the right is just pure black sunflowers as well. So a lot of food there, and I recharge the feeders once a week and empties the farm bank account. Don't tell my son.
Let's talk about some of the questions that have come in, Chris, while we're waiting to see if any other bird species visit us here at the bird hide. And hello to Tony and Jane Clark, who enjoy listening to the podcast. And Chris, they say, I thought the hint of spring may be of interest to you both. There's a photograph here of Mahonia, and they say the Mahonia always provides pollen for those who may need food at this time of year, while the snowdrops are about 2 weeks later than normal, they say. So they're waiting for their snowdrops.
Yes, snowdrops are out in this area of woodland. We visited them about 2 to 3 weeks ago, Matthew, on one of the podcasts. And the Mahonia as well, we've got some growing quite close to us in the woodland. I don't know quite how it arrived here, but we have an evergreen hedge at the farm, which is absolutely lovely. And at this time of the year, the Mahonia comes into full flower. And about 2 weeks ago, it was right at the end of December, there was 2 queen bumblebees. It was a warmish day, and they'd come out just to recharge themselves, and that was a lovely sight. So it does provide some extra pollen and nectar on warm winter days for those that like to venture out. And Matthew, just out of interest, there's an unusual visitor.
Who is that?
That's a coal tit, one of the smaller members of the tit family. Jet black head, but a white stripe right over the centre of the head. And it was sort of contemplating whether to come to the feeder. I think the birds are a little bit nervous at the moment. The numbers have dropped away in the last couple of minutes because there might be a goshawk or a sparrowhawk in this area of woodland, and that makes those birds very shy. They don't want to be breakfast. There it is again. It just popped in and flew away again.
Looks smaller than the blue tit.
It is slightly smaller, well, roughly an equal size, but a very petite bird, a hole nesting bird, rather like blue tits and grey tits, so it will use crevices in trees and eats a lot of insects as well at this time of the year. And you can attract it in your garden by putting up peanuts, as long as their feeders are sort of near a shrubbery, so the birds don't have to sort of fly the gauntlet or walk the plank, whatever you like to call it, to get to a feeder. If it's near some dense shrubbery, that's always a huge help, so that you can still see the feeders, but the birds feel quite safe. And you always know when you've got coal tits in the area, because they have a very distinct swear word. If you go into their territory, it's called a chew, chew, like that. And it sounds almost like somebody sneezing to some extent, but I always smile when I hear that, because I know somewhere in the nearby shrubbery there's a coal tit swearing at me, quite rightly so.
Now, out and about on the farm, as you are every day right throughout the week, you come across walkers, and you've been strong-arming people into listening to the podcast, because Corby Calaby sent a note to say, my friend and I were walking last week on the farm. We met you in the woods and you told us about the podcast. Well, I just wanted to say I absolutely love it. Keep up the good work. So there's another satisfied customer, Corby.
Yes, thank you very much indeed. Yes, I meet lots of people, and I've just had some little posters done. I think Anna Perot and Sophie Little, who are running Soundyard, who produce this podcast for us, they've designed a little poster with a picture of me and Rat on the front of it, and that'll be on display around the farm as well.
The poster apparently is on display currently.
Matthew, nuthatch. Oh, look at that. Sorry to interrupt, but nature doesn't hang about. Now, that was on the fat balls for about 5 seconds, so I fisted you on the leg to stop you talking, and I think it will be back, but beautiful bird, not related to the woodpeckers, although it looks like a miniature woodpecker about the size of the... That was it again.
It's just a fleeting glimpse.
A lovely glimpse of... There it is. Wow, upside down. And again, just
beauty.
Took a peanut, just like that. That's one of the woodland bird specialists, Sitta Europinus.
There he is again.
There it is. Look at that. That's a different one, believe it or not. That's female.
Very sleek.
Very sleek, sort of a battleship grey-blue on the back, and that dagger-like beak as well. You would think with a short tail that it is a small woodpecker, but it's unusual because it can go up trees, down trees, smooth bark trees, no problem at all. Nuthatch, because they put nuts in little crevices and kind of hatch into them or hack in. It was originally, we think, nuthack, and it's now nuthatch is the name. Beautiful birds, and they will use the old nest holes of woodpeckers here at High Ash Farm, and they're, I think, unique among British birds in that they gather mud or cement, so it's also called the plastering bird as well, and they make the nest hole the right size for them to go in and out, because a lot of woodpecker holes, particularly great spot woodpeckers, are about 2 inches across. There it is again. Female this time.
Very sharp, long beak.
Yes.
Two-tone with that light blue and sort of peach colour underneath.
Yes, and I thought you were going to say 2 toes for a minute. Now, woodpeckers have 2 toes facing forwards and 2 toes facing backwards. One of the toes has migrated round with the woodpecker species. That's a condition called zygotactyly, a really strange name, but Nuthatches have standard feet, which is 3 toes facing forwards and 1 toe facing backwards, which is miraculous because they can go up trees, down trees, sideways on trees, whereas woodpeckers generally start at the bottom of a tree and work their way up head first. So there we are, beautiful, beautiful woodland bird.
Here's a note from Noel and Jennifer, the Bishops, who live in Fletcher, Vermont, in the United States. And they say, good day, sir, to you, Chris. That's nice, isn't it?
Thank you.
Had an enjoyable moment on the New Year's Day podcast when Rat, Chris's dog, was barking, caused our terrible terrier, Fritz, who's also a bit chihuahua, to bark as well. Happy New Year, they say. So Rat has got fans all over the world.
You're telling me. I think he's got more fans than I have, and rightly so. But he got me out in the middle of the night and cornered a fox in the farm shrubbery, and I had to go out barefoot to try and retrieve him into the house. I was freezing cold and wet feet, so I did have some choice words with a little varmint when I got him back into the house, but we're great friends again now.
Well, thank you for all the messages. Those are just a few of them, and we read them all, though, but not always time to have them actually as part of the podcast. But keep the questions coming in, and any comments you may have, chris@countrysidepodcast.co.uk. And well, still mainly blue tits and the coal tit still here, and,
Yes,
and the nuthatch.
Oh, look, 2 wrens just on the tree trunk over there chasing it. They just flew off on the tree just behind us. 2 little troglodytes.
With that little tail pointed
Yes,
up.
appeared on our smallest British coinage, which I can remember back in the 1950s, the farthing. And just look at this feed, and there's suddenly the bird life on the feeders has exploded with all the tit species coming in, almost as though somebody's turned a switch on the feeders, and they're just illuminated with all these glorious small birds. So this is a woodland hide, and it's a real delight to share this with you and all our podcast listeners. Oh, coal tit just arrived. Lovely. Oh, goodness. They're arriving 6 at a time now.
We're only a few feet away. There's this one-way glass, and it's so magical. It is like a spell that's broken when we open that door and go out into the real world.
Yes, it is. Yes, and it's lovely and warm in here, so I thought I'd be kind to you on this podcast visit. Welcome to Hyash Farm, and enjoy winter, whatever's left of it. Maybe some snow next week. Look at that little coal tit. Oh, and a nuthatch side by side. Don't know which way to look sometimes. Wonderful.